On today's episode, we have the privilege of being joined with our very special guest, Dr. Kanika M. Sims. And Dr. Kanika is a distinguished professional in the medical community. She's known not only for her expertise as a board certified physician, but also for her impactful work as a dynamic speaker and author focusing on well being and health equity. Dr. Sims, we are thrilled to have you with us today. Hello.
Hi, it is such a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am too, because we have so many people who don't realize it is their jobs that are making them sick. But before we get into the topic and how health and well being, how your health and well being is being impacted, possibly by your toxic environment, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so as you said, I am Dr. Kanika. I'm a board certified internal medicine physician. I'm also a professor of medicine, author, speaker, and recently the founder of an organization, Invest Inclusion. I really do truly believe that health is your birthright. And so I reimagine, disrupt the healthcare space. And a couple of ways I do that. I work with women one on one doing health coaching, and I also work with organizations providing corporate well being programs.
I find it interesting that you would even have to come up with, a mission to remind people that health is our birthright. How do we get off focus about our health, and why is it like not a priority for so many Americans?
So I want to be mindful when I say not a priority, although I guess you are correct. I think it's just that there's so many things that conspire against us being healthy. I mean, we just have so many competing things for our attention. One of the things I say is health is actually really, really simple, but there's so many factors that are making you think it's much more complicated than it need be. So not to go not to go all the way, into this, but healthcare is a billion-dollar industry. Billion-dollar industry. And so people being sick is where the money is. And so if we consider those factors, the money, the focus is on illness and not on health. And so I think that's how we get into this place where there's a lot of confusion, because when you look at the supplement industry, it is also a billion-dollar industry. So I would say people are really, really interested in being healthy. They just don't know how. And
Yeah.
so, so it's really interesting when you look at like what are all the factors that get us to this place where so many people are sick, so many people are unwell. And I don't envy people out there in the world just trying to make their way, trying to take care of their families, trying to get a job, trying to keep a job, trying to, all the things that you're dealing with. And then you're also having to contend with how do I remain healthy in spaces where you're just getting so much conflicting information.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't want to blame either, right? It's really easy to sit in a place of blame and say, you eat the wrong food, you don't care about your health. And I think people do. But sometimes I wonder what comes first. Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it environmental that's impacting our health really? Like, is it I just don't know what to eat and I don't have access to it? Or is it I'm living this stressful life, all the things that you listed previously, right? The work, raising a family, maybe even caring for parents, like kind of being sandwiched in. Is it the stress, the environment, or is it, lack of knowledge or misinformation about taking care of ourselves?
So I think it's all of the above, right? So I always say people have much more control over their health than I think many people realize. I think a lot of people think that disease and illness is just something that happens. My mama had this, my grandma had this. We're a family where everybody gets cancer, everybody has high blood pressure, or everybody gets the sugar, right? And so people don't understand that it's actually the foods that you're eating, your lifestyle choices, the things that you're doing that's driving your health. And the reason it looks like everybody in your family gets the same things is because everybody in your family is living in those same environments. And so, yes, it's misinformation, it's lack of information. I mean, I just can't even tell you like just how we're just all bombarded with all these images of like the foods that we should eat, other things that we should do. We have this hustle mentality, sleep when you die. I It's actually no wonder that people just don't know what to do to be healthy. And so they don't really, and here's the thing, health is almost like the air that you breathe. You take
Mhm.
it for granted until you don't have it. You just think it's there. You think other people get sick, but not you. Other people get breast cancer, but not you. You don't think it's going to happen to you. You don't think illness is going to happen to you until it happens. And then that's when people start paying attention. But then it's frequently too late.
When we think about working in a toxic workplace, how would you define that based on your own experiences and how have you navigated toxic workplaces?
I think everybody has a different definition for what is a toxic workplace. But I think a simple definition for me would be any place that makes you feel devalued, demeaned, like you don't matter, right? When you walk in and you can just feel yourself tightening up because the person on the other end is saying things that make you feel small inside, that make you anxious. So I think it's sometimes the toxic workplace is it's not always clear, right? Because what's toxic for one person may not be as toxic for another person. And so I'm always really clear about part of it is the toxicity of the environment. Like there are certain things in the environment that are just like, no, we can't do this. A boss yelling at somebody, cursing at somebody, like some of the things that happen, right?
Mhm.
But then there are other little things that are just it's really hard to put your finger on unless you're the person on the receiving end and then you're very very clear about how this person's behavior and interactions towards you are making you feel. So I would say it is a what constitutes a toxic work environment can be pretty complex, and it can mean different things for different people.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I would say. And then the
Yeah.
second part of your question was,
Have you ever worked in a toxic work environment
oh,
and how did you navigate it?
oh my goodness. Okay. So I'm a physician. And so for those of you who don't know about the training of physicians, so when we do our after medical school, we spend 3 to 7 years in a training environment, an environment where about 20 years ago, they had to pass a law that would only allow us to work 80 hours a week. So I want you to imagine what the workplace environment was like before the law. So they made a law that said you can only work 80 hours a week. Now, I want you to imagine also being pretty much a captive. So if you don't complete this training program, you don't get to practice medicine. So you're in this space where they can do pretty much what they want and treat you almost however they want to treat you because you need to complete this program to graduate. And so when you put those forces in place, there is an organization that's meant to protect residents. But then you have to report. And if you report, then you might lose your certification. So people don't report. So when you ask me, have I navigated toxic environments? Unfortunately, although I'm in healthcare and healthcare should be about health and well being, healthcare is the most toxic environment that you can be in. And so from residency, that was toxic. And then I went into the workforce. And some of the things that are complicated about medicine is that part of the work that you do is just stressful in and of itself, inherently taking care of people who are ill, taking care of people who are dying. But then when you put the pressures of the financial responsibilities that come on board, there's a lot there. So yes, I've been in lots of toxic workplaces. I will tell you the thing that I've discovered is my degrees don't protect me. My education doesn't protect me because you are surrounded by people who have their own agendas, their own motivations, and not many people are just taught how to be good people. And then you put them in a position of leadership and and it's just it's a toxic combination. So yes, I have been in lots and lots of toxic environments, which is probably why I am so aware of the effects of a toxic workplace environment on individuals because I've experienced it myself. Um, the most toxic environment that I was ever in, it was completely unexpected. I actually went into this organization thinking this was the organization where I was going to retire. I was all in. I was the best version of myself. I was optimistic. I was like, this is it. I was ready. What I was not ready for were the microaggressions, were the constant questioning of like who I was and what I was. It was horrific, and it was really unexpected. And as a result, I started shrinking. I started becoming a lesser version of myself. I'm pretty vocal. I stopped being vocal. I just like, I'm going to put my head down, do my work, and not make any waves. And so it was really challenging in that place. I became anxious for the first time in my life. I was anxious. I started seeing a therapist. I probably needed a therapist, if I'm being completely honest, before that job. But I will
Mhm.
say that job really pushed me over the edge. It was just like, oh my God. And it also made me realize that if I, with all of my privilege, because I acknowledge the privilege I have of being a physician and being in a lot of these spaces, if I were dealing with this in the workplace, knowing how to navigate these spaces with all my privilege, what are other women of color dealing with in their workplaces? And so it just really, really, for me, increased my awareness of the toxicity of the places where we're working and how they can impact your work, your health. And I knew that based on studies and reading, but like when it happens to you, you're just like, oh, this is real. And so it really made me passionate about how do we make workplaces places that are healthy, where people can thrive, where you can be the best version of yourself. And if you can't, how do we help you make changes?
Yeah. I spend a lot of my time working with C-suite leaders to help their employees have good experiences at work through some of the workshops and trainings that we implement, executive coaching, DEI strategies. And they are sometimes so far removed that they are so unaware of what you just said, that there are a lot of people in their workplaces that do not know how to treat others. And it seems so simple that we treat people. My grandparents used to always tell us, treat people better than you want to be treated, right? Be kinder, be more loving, be more caring for people, and more empathetic. And people come to work and completely forget about the humanity of others and the dignity of others. And it sometimes it just makes me so angry. But like you, I the awareness of it, because I think I used to, like you, take my privilege of being in these spaces and I didn't even see it as privilege. Hey, I earned the right to be here. I took those classes, I passed those courses, I did the interviews, I showed up, and I'm coming here to give my best to this organization. But then we're faced with toxic behaviors such as microaggressions, belittling, people, I mean, just so bad that some people are being yelled at, touched inappropriately, all of these things that happen. And it's so frustrating. And I think you touched on it. One of the very first signs that I think people, for you to know if you've been in a toxic, if you are in a toxic work environment, is when you start to shrink, when you don't show up as your full authentic self. And if you are a person of great joy and you're bubbly and you, or even if you're not, even if those are not your personality traits, but whatever those traits are that you have, and you start to shrink and become small because of the environment, that might be a sign that you're in a toxic workplace. Do you think it's our employers' responsibility to ensure that we have good health at work and that we work in healthy work environments?
Yes, I do. So what I'll say, so you mentioned the Deloitte article, and so when you think about like when I think about how do I, so I have a master's in public health. I also did preventive medicine. I went to Hopkins, did my master's in public health. So I'm really interested in how do we keep people healthy? How do we prevent disease? And so when you look at that, so just some interesting facts for those of you who so the average life expectancy now is 76 years. 76 years. And when you're young, 76 seems like a lot. But as you get older, I'm in my 40s, 70 doesn't seem like all that much. And then
Mm.
I'll tell you, it's not just lifespan, it's health span. So it's not how long you live, it's how healthy are you during that time that you're living. And so some of the data and studies have shown that currently our health span, how healthy are you, is like 85%. So what this means is that if you live until 76, you're only healthy for 64 years. So I want you to really think about what that means. If you're only healthy for 64 years, this means that even though you live until you're 76, you're already taken out of the game in your 60s. You're feeling poorly, you're fatigued, you have cancer, you have all these other issues that are pulling you out. Now, the reverse of this though, if organizations were to get on board, because here's the reality, we spend a third of our life at work. So when we talk about toxicities, we talk about the environment. What environment do we spend most of our time in? Most of us spend our time in a workplace environment. So this is why the opportunity is so huge for organizations to really move the needle on this. And what they've shown is in the right workplace, the life span can go up to 90. So we're talking about going from our current life expectancy of 76 to 90. That is 14 additional years. But don't nobody want to live until they're 90 if they're sick, right? And so the other thing they show is that the health span of these individuals would be 95%, which means that 85, you would be 85 years in good health. Could you imagine? And so when we think about not only the responsibility of workplaces, but when we think about the opportunities that exist for workplaces in this space, the opportunity to create environments where people are healthy. So, what are healthy people? Healthy people are people who are more productive. They're people who are more engaged. They're people who are more dedicated to the work. They're also people who can exist in this workforce longer. So, I think there's so much in our society. We love young people, right? But people in their 50s and their 60s have wisdom, they have experience that can really move the needle in leading your organization forward. So I feel like it behooves us as organizations to say, hey, there's a role that we play here, a huge role that can really, really, truly impact us. And when I posted that article, I mean, let's think about this. Increasing lifespan by 14 years, increasing your health span by 20 years. When I posted that article, it was to make people think. The place where you choose to work is really truly a life or death decision, right? It really has that much of an impact on your health, on your life.
That is pretty powerful. The place that you choose to work is a life or death decision. Years ago when I was still working in public accounting, I loved what I was doing. Like I loved everything about it, Dr. Kanika. The hours, the travel, working with the clients, being a consultant. Even the level of stress, I felt like it was an adrenaline rush. Now I was in my late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s by the time I left. And I but I also had like these weird health things that would come up, like acne. Sometimes I felt like my hair wasn't growing and I didn't want it to be short. Now I want it to be short and it grows really fast. But I wanted it to be a little bit longer, more fuller. I would have these crazy abdominal issues. It just out of nowhere. Vomiting, just weird things. And I didn't know what it was, right? And then someone would say, hey, you should go check out this doctor. And I went to see her, and she was a gastrologist. And I didn't really know what they did. I was just like, I wanted some relief. And she came into the exam room and, after pleasantries, just started asking me a series of questions about my lifestyle. And I exercise. I used to run several miles a week. I was in a boot camp that I would work out with a group of women. I ate pretty well, pretty much plant based at that time. And, you know, except for sometimes because I traveled a lot, finding health, we would be at restaurants. But nonetheless, she started asking me these questions. And she looked me in the eye, just like it felt very somber. I was like, is there bad news coming? I hadn't done one test. And she said, Jeannine, your job is killing you.
Mm,
It's your job that is causing you to have these abdominal issues. She went through a list of things of, sort of gastro related diseases or complications. She said, you don't have that. It's the stress of your job. She said, you see your belly. She said, that's the way you exercise. Between the stress of the exercise and your job is this cortisol that you're producing, you're overproducing. And she just went through a list of things. And I was surprised to hear that. I had no idea that that could happen. And a few years later, I ended up leaving the firm and ran into some folks that I worked with, other people in my life, and they just kept going on and on about how great I looked. And I was like, well, damn, did I look that bad before? Like they saw a noticeable difference of getting out of that stressful environment. And now when I see my friends who are still in those environments, I see it. I see the lack of sleep. I see the stress. I see all of these other things. So when your patients come to see you, what is those? How do you, can you see it on them before you even run a blood panel? It's probably their lifestyle or their jobs that might be impacting their health.
Okay, so full disclosure, your lifestyle is everything when it comes to health, right? So you made some really excellent points. You were saying, I liked my job. I loved my job. I was having fun at my job. And it doesn't change the fact that you were at a really high stress level. And so what kills you at these places is the stress. Because as your doctor said, stress increases your cortisol. Cortisol is pro inflammatory. So you have all this inflammation. All that inflammation leads to your diabetes, your heart disease, your heart attacks, your strokes, all of these things. And so when people hear that stress can kill you, I think they're like, huh? Uh, make that make sense. Like, I mean, I'm stressed, but I'm good, right? And it's just like, no, boo, you're not good. Your body's not good, And so that is, I think, the key that people have to get is that your body keeps the score. So you can not sleep, you can run on fumes, you can, pop pills, drink caffeine, do all the things that we do to keep going, going, going. But your body is keeping score and eventually is going to hit you. And it hits you the way it hit you, Jeannine, where it's like all these like little weird symptoms. Maybe it's abdominal pain. Maybe it's these heart palpitations. You're thinking something's wrong with your heart. Maybe it's acne. Maybe it's, all those little things that taken separately, like maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but it's all stress. And so all diseases is a manifestation of like chronic imbalances in your body that then manifest a certain way. So for you, it may have been abdominal pain that had you not stopped could have become a stomach ulcer that could have led to X number of things, any number of things. Somebody else, it leads to heart problems and eventually a heart attack. Somebody else gets high blood pressure and eventually has a stroke. But it all comes down to our environment and how we're moving and living in these spaces. And I think that's the part that has been so eye opening to me as a healthcare professional on this side is that it still all comes down to the same basic things. The diseases all look different, cancer, all this stuff, even being overweight, all of that goes back to stress, right? And so all of these imbalances in your body may manifest differently in different people, but it still comes down to the central core tenet of your body needs rest, it needs water, it needs exercise, and it needs good nutrition. And how can you create an environment where you have all of those things and you said you were eating well, you were exercising, but you were in a stressful environment. And I know so many people who are mindful of what they eat, they're mindful of exercising, moving their bodies, but they are in such stressful, toxic workplace environments that they are still unwell because of the chronic stress.
So what do we do, Doc? What are we doing? What do
What do
we
we
do?
do?
Yeah, what do we do? Because everybody's talking about self care. And when I hear self care, it just sounds like going to the nail salon and getting a massage. Like, what do we do to care for ourselves to combat these environments? Because everybody can't quit their job, right? So, my first solution, like, get out of there. But realistically, everybody can't leave. So how can what should they do, Dr. Kanika?
Okay,
Give us,
so
help us, please help us.
well, here are a couple of things, right? Because I've been on this journey, and I think so. We didn't talk about this, and I have to drop this in really quickly before I tell you what we can do. Is this concept of weathering, and so toxic workplaces are toxic to all of us. Doesn't matter white, black, old, young, etc. Right? But if you are a black person in America, these toxic workplaces take a greater toll on your health because of this concept of weathering. And what weathering says is that chronic exposure to socioeconomic injustices, it has an effect on your body's ability to is weathering, right? So it has an effect on your body's ability to withstand things that come to you. So as people of color, we are at a disadvantage already because we have spent our entire lives like dealing with the effects of racism and biases and those sorts of things, even in your mother's womb, right? Because she was dealing with it. She was releasing cortisol. It was impacting you. So even before you were born, you're still having these things happen. And so the thing that when I really started leaning into weathering and looking at the healthcare outcomes and the health inequities, I was like, as a Black woman, I can't do this because this really will kill me. It's not, it's not hyperbole. It's not this thing you just say. It's like, no, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the stats. I'm looking at the weathering hypothesis and what this means for my health and recognizing these environments will kill me. And so one of the things I started saying, because I'm not going to, I believe words have power. So I'm mindful about what I say. And so one of the things I started saying is, y'all not going to kill me. And so for me, what that did is I'm a fighter. I was born a fighter. I'm an advocate. I mean, it's just my nature to speak up and to just injustice. We want to right the wrong. And what I discovered is that I needed to protect my peace, right? What I had to lean into is that because of weathering and my commitment to myself, my commitment to my health, my commitment to y'all not gonna kill me, I had to be willing to pull back. I had to be willing to pull back and say, that's not my battle to fight. I'm not engaging in that issue. And I think that's one of the things that we sometimes have to learn how to do. It doesn't mean we're shrinking. It doesn't mean that we are not engaging. It means that we are choosing. We are choosing whether we are going to engage in this thing, and we are choosing whether we're not going to engage in this thing. And we are also we have to have a greater awareness of like where we choose to put our energy matters, especially in a society where there's just so many things to be up in arms about. There's so many things happening in the workplace where you may say, this is not okay. And you also get to choose to say, this is how I'm going to show up in this space, but I'm not going to let you take my joy. I'm not going to let you kill me. And so that was one of the first things I had to do. I had to pull back, and that was a challenge for me, but I will also tell you it also opened up opportunities for me. It opened up opportunities for me to when I do lean in, I'm able to lean in from a place of peace, a place of knowing, a place of like, I'm going to engage in this, but there's no anger here, right? There's no anger, there's no animosity. I also truly believe that you teach people how to treat you.
Mhm.
And so that's something that I'm also very clear about. Like this isn't about you versus me. Um, there's no shade on you for what you're doing, but I just know this is how I show up in this place. And I think once you get 100% clarity about who you are and how you show up in places, then when other people are having bad days and other people are doing the things and saying the things, when you recognize that you get to choose how you respond, you get to choose how you show up, and you get to choose, and you should choose the understanding that what they're saying is no reflection of you.
Hey there, this is Jeannine K. Brown, your host of the UnToxic Boss. Did you enjoy that clip? If you did, there's so much more waiting for you in the full episode. You can catch the entire conversation over on Spotify or anywhere where you listen to podcasts. Just press the link below. We're exploring some powerful topics, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So don't forget to leave comments, reviews, and of course, if you love this show, give us a 5-star rating. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more people who need these conversations and solutions. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, don't be a jerk at work.